Yeah, I think we're okay. Okay, so hi, thank you for coming. I'm going to present now for about 20 to 25 minutes. I want to present my MBA project. And my project was dealing eventually with community participation mechanisms in projects of urban development. And I'm saying this was the subject eventually because I actually started with something slightly different, which I will explain how I went through this process next to the end. But this process of defining actually what I'm researching was a very big part of what I think I learned and what I kind of figured out during this project. So now we're going to do it like this is the table of contents. So the overview of the project. So the basic concept is that democracy is going through major changes in the Western world in the last few years. There are very basic things that don't work the way they used to work. And we see a reflection of that, or some kind of a manifestation of that, in the way community participate in what is very important for their life, which is urban development in their communities, in their neighborhoods. So I kind of went out on a journey to figure out how is this change manifesting in urban development, the way we do public discourse, the way people talk to each other, and the way people participate in democratic processes. I focused on two key aspects. The first aspect is decentralization, so how people can actually share the power of making a decision. And the second aspect is access and transparency, so how people can access, or how much the information, regardless of the decision power, how much the information is available for people. I decided to put the main focus of my paper on case studies. And this was something that I really enjoyed. I actually did 4 or even 5 case studies. I ended up putting 3 of them in my paper. The ones that didn't go in is a case study about a big soccer stadium in Israel that is potentially going to be demolished. The second case study that didn't end up in the paper is the Stade de France, which I actually spent a couple of weeks researching. It was very interesting, but I ended up leaving it outside. And the 3 case studies that I ended up putting in, we'll get to them. So what I learned about decentralization and decision in decision making. I think there are 4 things I want to mention here. The first one is independence. To enable decentralization of decision making, it is very important that the local government would have some level of independence. So as long as as much, maybe it's a scale, as much as the local government is depending on the central government for funding and for political stability to remain in power. And it also goes on for dependence on a specific group of citizens. So if a local government is very dependent on a specific ethnic group or something like this, their ability to share, the probability and the ability that they will share decision-making power is lower. And as much as their independence is higher, the probability that there will be any kind of power sharing increases. The second aspect is granularity. So it's easier to share decision-making power when we're talking about a smaller decision. Municipalities very often collect public opinion and do public surveys for small things like, this is a small space, should we make it a parking lot or a park? Very rarely they would actually share decision-making power in terms of like, should we have this new neighborhood as a low-rise or high-rise neighborhood? Principle versus detail. So this I will talk more deeply about, more extensively about close to the end. But the thing is that there's a research by a PhD from Israel called Dortheim Dortheimer, I think, who shows that it's very difficult to have people make decisions on very technical details. Most people that participate don't have a degree in urban planning. So the result that one of the research showed that the result that you get is somewhat similar to what you already have in the market. When you have people actually designing a park, the other design something, or designing a building, the other design something that is not feasible, or they design something that is very similar to what they already know. But when you share power about principles, should something happen, should there be access for low-income communities and stuff like that, then there's more value for the public opinion. And the last thing is actually a challenge that this whole space of urban development is facing and probably will always face, which is the not in my backyard concept. People don't like change. People don't like other people coming into their community. People like to have what they have. It's a kind of defining concept of this space. What I learned about access and transparency, I'm going to speed up because I'm wasting too much time on this. Access and transparency. So as much information that people have, this has a positive, research showed that this has a positive effect on creation of community. People, when they meet and talk about what's happening on the street, this has a strengthening effect on community ties. When you share information about planning, this nurtures and contributes to grassroots leadership. So more people coming up from the community and participating in the urban or the local government mechanism. There's a research showing from Toronto, Canada, showing that communities use this information to create forums, and these forums cultivate, the word I was looking for, cultivate leadership. Timing, so as early in the process as you share the information, this increased trust of people in the process and in the system itself. So this is actually could even be used as in a cynical way, right? But we see that in many places, people have a trust problem with the system. Going back again to what I said about how democracy is changing in our life right now. Many communities have a cynical perspective on existing systems, and sharing information helps increase trust. And the last concept is transparency of the decision-making process. So transparency of the voting in a specific municipal forum or something like this. This is a big question. You see many places fail to actually do that, and many places it became standard. So, for example, in many local government forums in the US, you can access all the meeting minutes publicly online. One of the cases that I researched was the Philadelphia. All of the city council meetings, you can find the minutes online, free, publicly available. But there is an issue with that because many politicians find it kind of difficult for their strategy to actually expose everything they vote on. Okay, so a quick word about how I chose the project. So I wanted to choose projects where I see information or I can talk to people about what the community did in these projects. This is the reason that I ruled out the two projects about the stadium in Israel and the stadium in Paris. Because in Israel, the situation is that there's the project with no people living on the perimeters right now. It's actually not housed at all. So there's no community. And with the Stade de France, there's a lot of community around it, actually very diverse, very interesting, but I didn't have I didn't feel that I have enough information about public discourse in France in the 90s, those things, some of them are not even online. So I decided to put this aside and I focused on 3 projects that show a very wide range. They're very different from one another of how community participate in urban development. So the first one is Philadelphia, second one is a project in Jerusalem, and the third one is the market in Tel Aviv. I have, okay, enough time, I think. Washington Avenue in Philadelphia. So this is actually one of the main streets in one of the biggest cities in the US, very old city that is very dominated by the modern design, the car-centric design. And Washington Avenue is basically an urban highway. There's in some parts of the road there are 5 and even 6 lanes. High speeds are allowed. There was a plan that was debated for 8 years to renovate this street, to make it more safe for bicycles and pedestrians. There are several schools around it, and it was a leading area in pedestrian casualties for car accidents in the state of Pennsylvania. There was a plan. This plan was split into 3 options and was introduced to the public a few years ago. Basically, they had a plan that's more pedestrian favoring more pedestrianism of the space. Second plan was more car-centric, keeping the 5 lanes across most of the road. And the third plan was a mix of them. The pedestrian plan was selected by a very extensive public survey process. They did many surveys. They had thousands of participants. It was in the low thousands. And you can actually see from September 20 or 21, I forgot, September 20, that the city announced, this is the plan A, the pedestrian plan. This is the city announced, it's appearing on the city website, that the city announced, we have elected this plan. And then in a period of a few months, there was no further information. And suddenly, in the February 21, the city announced that it's reissuing public surveys. They're forming debate groups. And eventually, after a few months of further debate, they decided to choose a more mixed plan that balances the plan A and plan B. And the residents don't actually get a formal explanation to why the original decision was taken back. So if we look at decentralization and access, the information was available very early on in the process. The community was engaged, but something in the decision-making was actually taken outside of the whole information sharing process, which really harmed the trust of the community in the system. We saw there's a lot to be learned about politics, local politics from this case. But if I look at this, then I think what happened is that both parties and local politicians decided that this is an ideological fight. The one group decided that if this is according to testimonies of the newspapers from Philadelphia and activists I spoke to, one group decided if this project goes on without meaningful pedestrianization of the space, this means that the whole Philadelphia could be being built around cars. And the other group decided that this is an attempt to gentrification of the neighborhood, and both groups kind of decided that this is the hill they're going to die on. So no compromise was obtained. I am going to speed up. Okay, the Lavan Ridge. This is a beautiful, beautiful, undeveloped natural environment on the southeast edge of Jerusalem. All of the environment looks like this today, and there are plans to build on the mountains. So Jerusalem in general is sprawling and building quite in a non-dense form. And again, 10 years, this thing been debated. There was a plan that was supported by a group of developers and the municipality to build a low-rising, car-dependent neighborhood, very flat and very wide in terms of the effect on the open environment. Environmental organizations took this to court, all possible levels of courts in Israel. They were denied, and the newspaper announced in 2020, the newspapers announced after a court ruling, a victory for the real estate supporting groups and a loss for the environmentalists. Then a new mayor of Jerusalem that was elected about a year earlier never said a word about this project, never has any public announcement regarding this project before 2021. He just decided in 2021 that he's retracting the support of the municipality from this project. No explanation. This doesn't appear in any city board meeting. And he's retracting his support. He's stopping the processes, and he's introducing a new plan, more urban environment with less effect on the open environment, on the natural environment. He didn't provide any explanation to this day. And a local activist that I spoke to actually said that their problem is that the fight for the open environment around Jerusalem is not public. They don't know if the municipality, as a general rule, plans to keep expanding Jerusalem to the open environment or increase building inside the urban space. And the authorities keep trying to make this a very specific fight. So this is this plan, let's fight on this plan. And activists trying to say there's a wider concept here to debate. And that's one of the issues. So there was no decentralization. The decision-making power is only in the hands of one man that's controlling the city board. And the access, actually, most of the information is available, but not the meaningful information, which is on what basis does the mayor makes his decision. The last case is a case that's actually still going on, development of the market, the Carmel market in Tel Aviv. It's kind of an old market, 100 years old. I love this photo. I made my screen, my desktop photo. You can actually see that the city here develops. Here, there's a high rises. There's a very high class hotels. Here, there's a very old, historic, beautiful neighborhood. And in the middle, there's a street that looks like it was taken from the city of Manila or something like this. No harm to Manila, I'm sure it's a beautiful city. So again, around more than 10 years of debates, in 2013, the city has managed to get a plan authorized by all the planning boards necessary to redevelop the market. Nothing has been done since 2013. Recently, a few months ago, the city announced that it's going to redevelop a certain part of the market. There's many statutory issues there. So actually, the merchants don't own their stores because this land is designated as a route, as a road, and not for commerce. So there's a statutory issue here. And this issue makes the merchants very open to negotiate with the city. Because the city said, if we solve this statutory issue, will you be willing to agree for, let's say, 1 year that you will have to evacuate, so we will redevelop the sewage and everything? So there's a lot of room for negotiating here. In January 2022, the city said, we're going to start. This is it. After 15 years of the debating, we're starting now. Since then, nothing has happened, except for one small square that is located around here. That's actually been, it's actually very beautiful. I was there just a month ago. So this is a photo I took just a month ago. And I was very happy to walk there and take this photo because I asked around a few people, and someone directed me to a stand of mainly pickles and olives and olive oil. And they said, this is the head of the Merchant Association in the market. So this is obviously someone that doesn't look like an MBA student, looks like a market merchant. This is him. And this is the Merchant Association kind of leadership. And this is the guy, Nashat Hussein, which I spoke to. And he says that they are blocking the development. The plan is to redevelop. There's the main street, That's the southwest part of the market. The square that's actually being renovated is here. And they are planning to block the redevelopment until some of the preliminary requirements in the negotiation are met. But all parties, I also spoke with the deputy mayor of two of the biggest cities in Israel, Tel Aviv and Ramat Gan. And all parties basically say that the negotiations are very amicable. This is very good spirit. All parties want to solve the situation. This is in the interest of all the parties, mainly because of the high touristic value of the area. But the work actually on the ground has been stuck for 15 years. So, general conclusions that I have from this work is something I kind of repeated. Smaller decisions are easier to decentralize, are easier to compromise on, and are easier to actually execute. So when you talk to people, hey, can we make this one square to look like this? There's more room for compromise. Because people don't feel that if they lose this argument, then they are done. And local context is, again, when people feel that they have to debate the prospects of car dependency in their city, they're less likely to compromise than if they are debating the future of this one square. So local context and smaller decision making, these are the two main conclusions that I got from this research. The future of the car market. So I'm very optimistic because I say that there's very much willingness and openness to compromise on all parties. The forums to make decisions are already set, already in work, already in place. So there's already forums that meet regularly between the city, the residents, the landowners, and the merchants. So there's not much to do, but in my recommendation, to decide to debate smaller chunks of the redevelopment of the market and remove the context, the wider context of gentrification in Tel Aviv as a general. And I think there's a lot of room for compromise here. So again, this is just to conclude. Transparency is kind of the standard in the West right now. People expect transparency. Decentralization is something that we have to demand. Elected officials will not share power out of their own will. And I kind of felt that there's a lot of room for people to innovate here because the tools that we are using are kind of, some of them are very traditional, very potentially outdated. I think there's a lot of room for innovation here, but I will finish here. I also added some suggestions for future research, but just to keep in time. That's a little bit about my personal reflection, but I feel that I learned from this project. I will say that I chose projects that are very different from each other, and this might have caused me to not go as deep as I could. And eventually, I really enjoyed this research, and I thank you for your listening. So that's my 25 minutes. And I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, thank you. And maybe you can have a seat if you like.
Okay.
It's less than formal. So thank you for your dense, very dense presentation. But it's very clear. I have one question about managing projects, especially the one you focus on, such as real estate or transforming a neighborhood, something like that. So, in terms of stage and process, we understand you recommend to have connection and contact with people living around from the early stage, right?
Yeah.
Any idea to organize this process?
Okay, so this is actually a question that I thought if I should invest time in. What I saw in all of the 5 projects that I did research on, and the 3 that I actually published, is that the forums for people to meet usually is not the challenge. I saw that people manage to meet. People have opportunities to even talk to their, in the US, you have a congressman of the county. It's a very local representative on the national level, right? And they also have representatives on the state level, the city level. So I found that people find ways to talk to their elected officials and to talk to each other. For example, deputy mayor of Ramat Gan that I spoke to, he said, I meet residents on a daily basis. So I didn't find that this is really the issue here. Am I answering the question?
Please, yeah. And to go beyond your answer and precisely beyond my question. We have a couple of researchers having some recommendation in terms of formalization.
Yeah.
The way to formalize the process, for example, don't make the mistake between the forum you mentioned and the survey.
Yeah.
Survey can be a sort of a first stage to express view.
Yeah.
But people can feel, oh, I have still something to say. Second point, what we learn is also we have a sort of large range of population having some opinion, but not very eager to express them. And some others having some big interest being activists.
Yeah.
So how can we cope with these different profiles in terms of people having interest?
Yeah. So actually, this is a very interesting topic. A lot of the experts mention this, especially the former deputy mayor of Tel Aviv that I spoke to. He said he's an interesting figure. He was a TV writer, quite famous one, who decided to go to local politics, and he was elected as kind of a protest candidate. And people expected him to be the bad boy, of the local government. And then he joined the coalition of the mayor and he became the deputy mayor. And he says, I find that there's a huge difference between the opinion of the people and the opinion of the people that show up to the meetings that we hold. There's a big difference. Again, as you say, the people that show up are people that have interest to show up. They have spare time. They have maybe the expertise. I think there's a lot to research there. I didn't do too much of my research on this. The difference between the people that participate and the average opinion. But if I'm taking from this research in Toronto, if you do it early on in the process, that the people with the interest, especially the financial interest, have less of an advantage because they still don't know if the plan would affect their own land in this street or something like that. And then when you cultivate grassroots leadership, this is something that can kind of balance out the difference between voiced opinion and average opinion. But I don't think it's a perfect solution, of course. Also, as much as you widen the audience of people that participate, you get something that's closer to the average opinion, right?
Sure.
I think it's an issue that a lot of people are dealing with.
And the other point is how it's difficult to cope with profile like activists.
Yeah.
Able to block the process, but also to increase the cost to finalize the process.
Yeah.
Because you can have trials, shoots, and many obstacles along the road.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to figure the thing if there's something from the interviews that I did that speaks to this in a different perspective. But yeah, it's definitely an issue that came up in many of my conversations.
So, okay, let's move to another side. This one was about the lesson for the reason for which we have to pay attention to population. So let's move to your own behavior.
My behavior, yes, of
Your,
course.
as part of it, not, not in general, and not skill for having any opinion. Well, what would be the most important learning if you would have to repeat again doing such field project?
So if you don't mind,
yes, you
I'll go back
yes, exactly.
to this slide.
Yes.
So for me, the most important learning is, first of all, specifically to urban development, the jurisdiction, the system of laws that this project is existing on is super important. If I would do this again, I would choose 3 projects from Israel where I'm native in Hebrew and I can read the law.
Sure.
Or second best, 3 projects from the same state in the US. This is what I would do. Or maybe, yeah, this is what I would do, because I would then be able to create much more meaningful comparison between the projects. That's the first thing that's really relevant to urban development. The second learning I have for myself is that one of the main goals for me in this project was to kind of reach a level of expertise in urban development that will be enough for me to decide if my future is in urban development.
Will it be?
No. Yes, but it has been very helpful. I think part of adult life is to realize that sometimes no is an answer, right? You can get a yes for it.
It's really acceptable.
Exactly. So for me, it was a great way to learn about the space. I really got to a level that I feel I'm able to have a intellectual, fact-based debate on urban development. And I learned that this is not the space that I want to be in. So this is the second thing I say for myself.
Okay, nice. Very interesting. So third part, side or part. Suppose you started the MBA for improving some managerial skills, suppose.
Yeah.
What could be the main lessons for the coming manager you will be?
Okay. That's interesting. So I think, okay, there's something very important is the level of guidance, the level of control, the level of, on the scale from micromanaging to complete freedom. I know that I operate best with a high degree of freedom.
Okay.
I know that as a manager, when I have teams that I manage, I use a high degree of freedom. But in this project, I think I learned that there's also, specifically in this project, I think I could get maybe a more empirical result, or at least do more empirical research if I would operate in a more closed or more closely supervised environment. So I think that this was a good experiment for me in actually, let's say, I thought a lot of times along the way, if I would have a manager in this project who would tell me to do this, and this would contribute in a way. So I think it also introduced me something that I'm usually not experimenting in, which is this side of like trying to swim more to the closely managed edge of the scale, I think.
Okay, I like very much what you mentioned about the role of having case studies or field studies, just to bring the rules from specific case.
Yeah.
However, the big challenge is the ability to generalize.
Yeah.
So what I've observed precisely locally, how can it be sort of lessons and learnings. potentially my last question. In terms of leadership, it can be far now because you opened the door. You mentioned the two poles, leaving people free or to be tight in terms of expectation, but also rules. What is your best feeling in terms of leadership for running a team? You personally.
Yeah, I'm not trying.
I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
It's a very question. What can be your leadership style?
Okay, so I like to think of myself, of course, it is not an objective, it is a subjective answer, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is a
So
subjective.
I like to think of myself as a liberal leader that use usually interpersonal interactions to motivate people, as in the management specialization, they have this kind of scale of, like, I forget the term that they use, but it's task oriented and people oriented, and I'm more people oriented. And I usually focus more on the personal interactions. I'm not sure if this answered the question.
I don't know. What I expect is you understand having a personal orientation costs a lot because you need to have forum.
Yeah.
And it's time consuming.
Yeah.
For sharing feedbacks.
Yeah.
And give advices.
Yeah.
So if you are aware, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. No,
Okay.
Of course.
This is the hidden part of my question.
Yeah. It's also challenging because for example, in my company, we had a team of developers. It is very hard to quantify the contribution of developers. It's very hard. So, of course, you need to use a lot of follow-ups and you need to use a lot of trust. And sometimes there are underperforming parts of the team that it takes time to figure out that they are underperforming. Yeah, of course, it's important to be aware of.
Okay. Nice. So, an unusual case, Jacqueline. Do you have any question to the candidate?
I do have some.
You do.
I don't want to
No, I'm yours.
take too much time, but I'm having fun with this. And so I'm coming for adaptive freeze.
Oh,
Yeah, we should check. So this is super relevant to my background. Really great to hear the examples. Both of your examples from Jerusalem I was not familiar with, but Philadelphia has a pretty complicated code and structure. So that was an ambitious project, I think, for you to take on. So I was really struck. I like the examples that you chose. I thought I knew where you were going, and then your third example kind of threw me off. So specifically with your first two examples, Washington Avenue, Lemon Ridge, do you believe that if before they had started either of those projects, they had done a city vision or a community vision or a neighborhood vision before they talked about any specific project, does that centralize or does that decentralize the process?
I think you are hitting
A very smart question.
a very soft, a very touchy point.
Yeah.
For developers, because very interesting. Jerusalem does not, in Israel, there's a format of loosely translated and a city vision. Okay. A plan that determines zoning and stuff like that. Tel Aviv has a city vision that's been approved, and now recently, like 2 or 3 years ago, at the beginning of COVID, re-approved, accommodated, and modernized, and it guides all of the local development that is going on. Jerusalem doesn't have one because of the many political complexities. I do really think it affects this specific project and all of the projects in Jerusalem. I think it's very important, and one of the reasons, there are many reasons why Jerusalem doesn't have a city vision. But one of the reasons is that the currently in power figures don't have an interest of creating something so limiting, right? If they want to do a city vision, they have to compromise to get it approved and everywhere. They say currently we are in power, so it's in our benefit to just develop whatever we can do right now, right? We will be the one making the profit, if it's financial profit or political profit. And we don't have an interest to now compromise for something that will happen in 10 years. About Philadelphia, I think that if it would have a city vision, it would be a very car-centric one. So actually, this would have a decentralization effect, because it would limit the opportunity of specific urban communities to say, here we want to do a road diet. This would not be possible. If Philadelphia would have a city vision, it would be a city vision of like the average of the US. So I think if a city vision has some centralizing effect against reducing decentralization. Yeah, I do think that.
Yeah, the jacking question is very important about the expected role of vision as such as a framework. But it's also related to some key element about the scale. We can succeed about a district, but fail for a larger scope. That's always the tension. For any urban project.
And potentially also, if there's a city vision plan, maybe that allows for more decentralization in the very lower levels, because the mayor would say, okay, the extent to which this can go against what I want is limited, because there's already a city vision in place. So maybe I don't care if they fight amongst each other about this specific tree, right? So maybe it could also have a decentralization effect. Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we done?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Amit.